When you're setting up your environment, you need to keep asking yourself, why? Why are you putting these things in the places that you are? Why are you including this or that thing? How does it benefit children's learning or their social emotional development? Children's needs should be in the forefront when we're creating spaces for them. We're not showing off how good we are at interior decoration. We're trying to get children to connect with the space so that they want to be curious, want to know more, want to ask questions, and feel safe to do so. Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, the podcast that's all about nurturing that natural curiosity in our early years kids and students. I'm Edwina, your host from the Ed's Lessons blog, a passionate advocate for play and inquiry, and on a mission to keep children curious and questioning. The days of talk and chalk are over. We're diving into the world of integrated, inquiry and nature-based learning and exploring the strategies that create lifelong learners. So if you're a classroom or homeschool educator or even a curious parent, then this is the place for you. It's back to school time in the Northern Hemisphere, so I thought that it might be the perfect time to give those of you that are returning to classrooms, or perhaps this is your first time in a classroom, and I guess just for educators everywhere else, because let's face it, every day is a good day to start fresh. But if you are getting ready to return to the classroom, then today's episode might be just what you need. By now you've got your class list and hopefully you've got some idea of the needs of the children that you are going to be teaching this year. So now what? I think that there are two areas that we need to address when it comes to getting ready and start teaching on that very first day. Firstly, everything is about being organized in terms of the setup and practicalities of running a classroom. And secondly, and I think most importantly, is thinking about your why when it comes to your lesson planning and content you're going to be teaching. Your why is driven by your belief system and your values. And this is why your why needs to be really clear. What do you think about how children learn best? What does the research say? Who do you most closely align with? I wrote a blog post some time ago when I unpacked Waldorf, Reggio Emilia, and Montessori. So if you're a graduate or new to these educational approaches, you might want to have a read. I'll link to that post in the show notes, and also I'll link to episode 8 where I discussed finding your educational philosophy. For me, everything starts with the needs of the child. In other words, how you set up your room needs to take consideration what is best for children. Not what we like, but what's best for children. Every child comes to us with their own experiences. Just think how hectic mornings can be in homes where parents are trying to get kids ready and themselves to go to work. So our learning spaces need to be places that are not only inspirational and spark curiosity for kids, but also places that are organized and calm. Everything needs to have a place. You'll need all those practical things like where you'll put books and equipment and where kids will put their bags and any equipment they need to bring into class. Children really need help with organization, so having a practical routine in place will really go a long way to help them settle in, because routines make things predictable. And children thrive when their lives are predictable. So make sure you model the model with them. Walk them through on that very first day where they put their stuff, how and where they put their books, how to store their work. These practical routines are not something you just do once on the first day. These routines are things you model each and every day until they get it and it becomes automatic. And guess what? When they go on holiday for 2 weeks and come back the next term, you have to model the routines again because most of them will forget. You'll find that there will be those children who will forget stuff. Their cubbies or their desks or their backpacks will be littered with paper, and basically they have difficulty organizing themselves and their thoughts and their learning. And learning can be chaotic for these kids, and often they're not meeting their full potential simply because they're lacking executive function skills. Apart from all the other things we integrate and teach kids, I think to teach them how to approach things in a systematic way is really helpful. So just like if you want kids to be curious, we need to be curious. In the same way, if we want kids to be organized, we need to be organized. So make sure you have an organized space where everyone knows exactly where everything should go and also how you want students to complete their work. Model the writing of their name on that piece of work when you complete a task. Model what it is they need to do or where they need to place their work. For many of us adults, this organization comes naturally, but it doesn't come naturally to all students. And think about as you go about your day, what does your desk look like? Because I think our workspace also sets an example. One of the things many teachers that I work with are doing more and more are removing their own teacher's desk. Not only does this mean you no longer have a dumping space, but it also means you have more room for students, and it forces you to be super organized. Your teacher's desk could now either be removed totally or used as a work surface where kids can tinker or create, or perhaps that's where the equipment is stored. A quick browse on Pinterest will give you so many ideas, and I'll put a link to my Pinterest board in the show notes, and hopefully you can find some inspiration there. Another thing we need to consider is where we store our books and equipment, because you want it to be somewhere where children can reach things. We are trying to grow independent, self-reliant children, autonomous children that feel that they have some power over their lives. So making it easier for them to access equipment is crucial. Think carefully about your storage and how easy or difficult it will be for young children to reach and to access equipment. Now let's talk next about decorating classrooms. And this is something so many teachers just love. But I'm going to put a spanner in the works here. Yes, you want to get your labels done. Yes, you want to have designated places in your room where you'll want to display stuff and label things. And you totally should, because those labels also serve as word banks and they help kids read. So when you're printing out labels, make sure the font is such that it helps kids to easily read the label. And for young children, the label may need to be accompanied by a picture or a photograph. And keep in mind what life is like for children, and even for ourselves nowadays. Life is hectic. There is stimulation everywhere, and many students come into our spaces already overstimulated. So our rooms need to be places of calm. Remember, you might like bright colors and want to bring every single thing from your storeroom or your garage from home and the kitchen sink, but this is not a space for you. This is a space that you're creating where you want children to be calm, be independent, and be curious. So a mishmash of rainbow colors and plastic fantastic so that it looks like kids have just stepped into a fanfare is not the look you want to go for. Because you know how kids end up at a fanfare, right? They're bouncing off walls because they're so overstimulated by all the colors and sights and sounds and everything. So you want to think about creating a place that reduces stress and is calming for people. And when you think about a place that reduces stress and is calming for just about everyone, what do you think of? For me, it's nature. So one of the best things you can do when setting up your space, I think, is to keep your colors neutral and think nature. Muted tones of sand. Think forests and mountains and beaches. Bring in natural elements like pot plants. And if you need to hang something, why not bring in more nature and branches that you can hang stuff from? Reggio Emilia classrooms do this really well. And keep in mind that the space is the third teacher. The first teacher is the parents. The second is you and I, the educator. And the third is the environment. And when you're setting up your environment, you need to keep asking yourself, why? Why are you putting these things in the places that you are? Why are you including this or that thing? How does it benefit children's learning or their social emotional development? Children's needs should be in the forefront when we're creating spaces for them. We're not showing off how good we are at interior decoration. We're trying to get children to connect with the space so that they want to be curious, want to know more, want to ask questions, and feel safe to do so. So our classrooms should be spaces where children can also reflect on their work and their wishes. So yes, we need to be organized, but we shouldn't be filling all the walls with all sorts of posters. We need to keep some bare spaces where children can display their work. We also need a big bare wall for creating a learning wall, which is going to evidence your students' learning, their questions and their answers. And you can find out more about learning walls, by the way, and how to use them in the interview I had with the expert on learning walls, Jessica Vance. I'll put a link in the show notes to that episode. Another thing we need to consider are our invitations and our provocations. We want the objects that we put into our spaces to be intentional, and we want those objects to spark wonder and thinking and curiosity. We're not just putting in random stuff from home because we want it out of our garage and out of our storerooms. We need to be thinking about our why the entire time. When someone walks into your classroom, your values will be clearly visible. The colors you've used, your objects, your invitations, and your provocations will all clearly convey your values. After I completed a course with Claire Warden on nature pedagogy, the way I approached setting up my classroom completely changed. In my own classroom, for example, I used either Hessian, which is beige-brown in color, to cover all the colorful notice boards on the walls, or black. Both are great neutral backdrops that make children's work really stand out. I also have lots of natural elements in my room, and my provocations are always linked to my science and my humanities curriculum. And often my science stuff is in an area in front of my window where I have invitations for children to explore and read and create independently. And outside the window, I had a bird bath, and inside the window, a poster with the different types of birds that visit our garden. I was also lucky to have access to an outdoor area where I had planters and gardening tools and natural loose parts, things like pebbles and rocks and sticks and seed pods and gum nuts. And I also had a dead tree inside my room, which was really not actually a tree. It was just a bunch of branches, large branches that I had tied together and used this as a tree in my room where I hung many of my children's creations. So if you had to imagine this or walk into my classroom, I think my values and my love for nature pedagogy is very evident. How you arrange the tables or the desks in your classroom also says a lot about your values and what you know about how children learn best. In episode 11, I spoke about creating inspirational indoor spaces. So have a listen to that episode next. I'll link it for you in the show notes. And I also have a free checklist for you that you can use as a handy planning tool as you go about setting up your space. I link that in the show notes for you too, so you can very easily download that. Now, you're organized, everything has a place, you've got everything labeled, you've got your routines planned, and your provocations, invitations are all set up. Just a heads up that I will be interviewing someone very special and knowledgeable when it comes to invitations and provocations. So make sure you click the follow button so you're notified when that episode drops, because you won't want to miss out on that. It promises to be a very exciting episode all about setting intentional provocations. Now, the next part of getting ready is to consider your planning and your lessons. And of course, if you're here, it means you're either not a run-of-the-mill teacher or you're someone that really wants to make a change and find the best way to engage children and get them interested in learning. And I have to say, almost every episode of Blooming Curious has something to do with that. So might I suggest you take this podcast along with you when you're going for your walk or your run, but please only one earbud because you still want to be aware of your surroundings, and have a bit of a binge. Obviously, as I have spoken about until the cows come home, if you want to truly not only get kids curious, but keep them curious and engaged, then you simply have to make inquiry part of your teaching. And that does not mean throwing out explicit instruction. It means dovetailing explicit instruction and inquiry. And I've spoken about that in several episodes, to which I will link in the show notes for you so you can take a deep dive into that next. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Inquiry does not add to your workload. It's not a separate subject. Inquiry is a lens through which you teach. It's about getting kids to think, to question, and to become independent and autonomous learners. And as an inquiry teacher, the student and their needs are at the forefront of everything you do. You're asking yourself why the whole time, to make sure you're not just doing things for the sake of it, but because you have a valuable purpose. And you're getting kids to think about why too, so that they can start thinking about how they learn, so they're developing those metacognition skills. Last week, I attended the most awesome 2-day seminar with the wonderful Jessica Vance and Trevor McKenzie here in Perth. It was entitled Unlocking Curiosity, Nurturing and Cultivating Inquiry, and of course, they took us on an inquiry journey to uncover the various teaching strategies that lead to inquiry and a cultivation of curiosity in our classrooms. Everything from questioning and thinking techniques to how we evidence and document children's learning and wanderings through learning walls. And what really struck me most, and the one message that stayed with me, is that it's our dispositions and our mindset that really matter if we want to lead and teach with a lens of inquiry. Inquiry is about being curious and finding ways to solve problems and think about things differently. It's not about accepting obstacles that prevent us from doing something in a certain way, but more about finding ways around obstacles to empower us and our students. I love chatting to April Zyko in episode 33, where she talked about how she overcame obstacles about taking children outside for learning, which really illustrated how when we put children and their needs at the forefront, we can overcome all the challenges and the red tape that we sometimes have. Where there is a will, there is a way. When we think about the curriculum, it is what it is. We have no control over it. What we do have control over is how we approach it and what happens in our classrooms and the strategies we use to teach the material. So as you sit down with that curriculum in front of you, think about how you can use your science and social studies to drive the learning. Think about the essential questions you might ask. Think about the provocations, invitations you will need in your space to get kids interested and wondering. Listening to episode 37, where I talk about integrating science, will be really useful, and I'll link that in the show notes for you too. And then from there, you plan your English language arts and your literacy as well as your mathematical experiences. In episodes 21 and 23, I spoke about how to plan integrated experiences, so those might be useful episodes for you to listen to as well. Now, I know and I understand completely how overwhelming it can be to start something new. But I also know that trying new things makes life more exciting. And inquiry is just such a beautiful thing because it truly taps into what is most important for children. Things like having autonomy. Inquiry also has that element of challenge. And it's the challenge that kids like. Just think about how they love playing video games and getting to the next level. They get so excited and pumped about that. It makes them excited because it's challenging for them. Our brains are hardwired to learn new things and to face and overcome challenges. This is what real learning is about. From your standpoint, I also know full well what it's like to be the one that tries new things or to be the one inquiry teacher and no one else is doing it. I know what it's like to want someone to bounce ideas off and there's no one there because perhaps your peers don't share your values or your mindset. Or you want to chat about how you can get kids curious, but your partner teacher just wants to talk about the parties they're going to on the weekend. We all crave that human connection, just like the kids we teach. We all want to belong to a group, just like the kids we teach. And that's what my vision is for Blooming Curious, a resource for curious, like-minded educators. I also know how difficult it can be to implement what you learn either from a podcast or perhaps in person at a professional development day or a workshop with your favorite expert. And then you get back to your classroom or you sit down and plan how you're going to implement all this, and you suddenly feel overwhelmed. And you just wish you had someone there you can bounce ideas off, or someone to walk you through the process. So what I've done to help you get started with inquiry is create a step-by-step guide called Inquiry 101, which takes you through the exact first steps that I took in my own classroom when I got started with inquiry. And I'll leave a link for you in the show notes so that you can get your own copy of Inquiry 101. But to take this one step further, I also know how so many teachers are craving that interaction with other like-minded educators. And I spoke to those teachers at this 2-day PD, at this 2-day workshop that I was on last week. So many of us are just craving that interaction with other like-minded educators. And so I would like to offer you an opportunity to join a group of educators who are just like you. Educators who want to break away from the status quo. Educators who want to teach through an inquiry lens. Educators who want to include more of a connection to nature for their students. Educators that really want to make a difference, not just to their students' learning, but in their own lives too. Educators that want a place to get support, chat to others, get ideas, and get PD, professional development, on tap, as well as perhaps a step-by-step course to accompany the Inquiry 101 e-guide. If you would love to be part of such an exclusive, private, professional, and supportive learning community, I'll invite you to just click the link in the show notes to register your interest. There's nothing else attached. You're simply saying, hell yes, I would be interested in being part of a group of colleagues and friends where we help and support each other to be exceptional, curious educators. Now, I can go on and I can talk for days. There's so much to cover. But the best advice I can give you as you start planning to receive students and get them thinking and curious is simply to place the needs of your students at the forefront of everything you do. Remember your why. Don't lose sight of your why, and just be brave to try new things and go and have some fun. I wish you all the best as you start out on this new year and this new journey, and I will be here with hopefully more inspirational content. And remember, don't worry about things you have no control over. Just focus on what you can control and where you can make a difference in the lives of the children in your care. So go to the links, download your free checklist on how to plan an inspirational classroom, as well as your Inquiry 101 e-guide to get started. Listen to all the episodes I mentioned. I'll link them all in the show notes for you. So thanks for listening and following along. I know you could listen to any of 100 shows out there, but you chose this one, and I'm so pleased you did. And if you like or appreciate the show, I would love you to leave a review, which will help the show grow. And also hit the share button and send it to a colleague or friend that you think would appreciate getting blooming curious too. And if you want more of my personal insights and tips to get kids curious and interested in learning, then sign up to Get Curious, my inspirational weekly newsletter. There'll be a link for you in the show notes. So until next week, same time, same place, stay blooming curious.